Hello and welcome. So before I start this video, please like and subscribe to our channel to help us grow, because without your help, this is pretty much a charity work. No one pays us for this. So with that said, today I'll be talking about how you should be allocating your budget for your archery setup. And why am I talking about this? Throughout my experience, few years of experience, and I've encountered a lot of people who are buying things with a very funny mentality. So they would allocate a lot of their budget on their bows, and then they will be skimpy or neglecting for the arrows, the targets, and their thumb ring. And as a result of this weird way of allocating their budget, the result is the arrow does not suit the bow, resulting in broken bows. Without a good target, they have broken arrows, a lot of broken arrows, and then the thumb ring is uncomfortable. So it's a very, very painful shooting experience. They may buy very, very expensive bows like Saluki bow, and then the arrows are just like the cheapest arrows they can find. That is not the way you should be spending your money. So today I'll be going through the important components of your archery setup so that you can consider what matters to you and allocate your budget accordingly. So let's begin with some breakdown of the component, the price and its significance. So usually in terms of price, the bow will cost more than the arrows, and arrows is going to cost more than the target, and the target is going to cost more than the thumb ring. Generally it's like that. However, in terms of importance, in terms of significance, I would say that your thumb ring matters more than your target, and your target matters more than your arrows, and your arrows matters more than your bow. So I'm not going to go through each of these components and explain to you why I think so. For those who are experienced, you may already agree with this. For those who are inexperienced, I'll guide you through the mentality, the thoughts, so that you can understand why is it in this order. So let's begin with the bows. Here is a price range in US dollars. Anything under 200, that's an entry-level bow for me. Between 2 to 400, that's an intermediate level, and anything above 400, that's premium from my point of view. So for example, here's a spearman bow, and this is a premium bow. Also, this is a marina bow, and that would also consider as a premium bow from my point of view. Even though I could have bought a Saluki bow, which I think is an amazing bow, very well made, very high quality, but the thing is, my budget does not allow me. So I'd rather have two cheaper bows than one premium or very premium bow. That's my personal point of view. In my opinion, a good bow has to be smooth to draw, has to have low amount of hand shock, has to have a low amount of vibration. But this is of course subjective, because I've seen a lot of people who would say a stacking bow smooth, even though when I draw it, it's really, really stacky. But maybe it's subjective. Some people just consider a stacky bow to be smooth. So I'm not going to go into details of what makes a really good bow, because maybe they have a different opinion. But anyway, just keep this in mind. Good things are not cheap. Cheap things are not good, but expensive things aren't necessarily great. Just because you pay more does not mean that bow is better. Keep this in mind, because I'm going to share with you something I have encountered. So for example, I have a customer who spent something like 500 euros on a bow that was supposedly indestructible. It is not a laminated bow, so technically it should not break that easily. And despite being that kind of price range and what it was advertised for, he actually encountered splinters in the bow within the first week of use. So there you have it. Price is not directly proportional with the quality. Sometimes even very expensive bows, they can break. But of course, I believe that these expensive brands should come with a very good after sales service. Whatever your definition of a good bow is, let's assume that you have bought your favorite bow, and now we should look into using suitable arrows in terms of its spine and weight so that it will protect your bow. Otherwise, why would you want to spend on such an expensive bow only to break it very soon after, right? So that brings us to the topic of arrows. Now, I consider the arrows more important than the bow because think about it this way. You now have your favorite bow, but it shoots all over the place. Will you enjoy it? I have never seen someone who would proudly tell me, look, I have this amazing bow that I have longed for many years, but it's so enjoyable to shoot all over the place. No such thing, right? When you have your favorite bow, the next thing you want is to do well with the bow, at least to an acceptable range, right? Something that you consider acceptable. So let's look at some of the details about good arrows. Now, an entry-level arrow would probably be something below $50 a dozen. That's considered very cheap. An intermediate level is anything between $50 to $100 a dozen. And premium arrows would go for $100 and above for a dozen. But its price range is not something that I'm very critical about because good arrows is more than just the price. It is more about the tolerance. Okay, for example, the spine tolerance, the weight tolerance, the straightness tolerance, spine alignment, and a high front of center. So with good qualities here, you should have arrows that are consistent from arrows to arrows within a dozen. If you have that, your arrows should group tightly, assuming that your form is good, your technique is good. Of course, if you have horrible technique, then all this doesn't matter. But at least one thing, you should still have a good set of arrows that meet this minimum spine requirement and the minimum grain per pound requirement of your bow. Otherwise, you may break your bow. Now, if you have a good set of arrows, okay, both in terms of its tolerances and something that meets your bow requirement, your arrows are actually irreplaceable or very difficult to replace. And you may not understand this until you have reached a certain level. Because if you have tight tolerances arrow, let's say you break one of them, you think you can buy the exact same arrow again that will meet the tolerances of all the other arrows? No. It is very difficult to find an identical arrow to replace the one that has been lost. So if you had to get a replacement arrow, you may as well just wait until you deplete your current arrow and then buy a new set that is tight tolerance. Because any replacement arrow, they probably would not match with all the others. So that brings us to this next topic, that you should protect your good set of arrows, which is to use good targets. Now, targets, there's actually tons of options in the market. Some of them pretty much free because you can just make it yourself using like rags or plastics and just dump it in a box. Or you can buy professionally made targets, commercial targets that could actually be even greater than the price of a premium bow. But of course, I'm not going to go through all the options of target. There's just too much. I'm just going to share with you something that I'm familiar because that's something that I sell. I usually use EVA foam. EVA is a material that you usually use on, let's say, the yoga mat or the kindergarten's floor mat for the kids so that when they fall over, they don't get hurt. So that's EVA foam, and the density that I use is usually 80 kilograms per cubic meter or 5 pounds per cubic foot. Don't worry about density, that's just like technical stuff. And I'm going to share with you some of the price range that I sell for. So for example, a 50 by 50 by 5 centimeter sheet would be something around the $11 US. 100 by 100 by 5 centimeters would be something in the $43 US. And a 45 by 45 by 45, that's something like $96. And I'm going to show you something, this one here. I'm going to just show you right now. It's pretty big. Okay, so this is pretty heavy. This is something like 8 kilos. Very big, and it has 6 sides. Okay, it's a cube, so it has 6 sides, which I can use for a long time. So for that kind of price range, you can use it for a long time. In my opinion, it's really worth to get, despite fairly expensive. A good target should provide soft landing for your arrows. That is in contrast with hard targets such as compressed grass, because compressed grass, they will actually stop your arrows very abruptly, and that could actually damage your arrows. So I actually would prefer foam type targets where they provide a more gradual stopping power, and that will actually prolong the lifespan of your arrows. Also, a good target should be durable, because if the target is not durable, you'll be replacing it very frequently. So over the long term, a non-durable target would actually be really expensive. So you might as well actually buy something that is more durable, so that in the long term, you actually spend less, you save money. A good target should also have a reasonable amount of thickness so that it prevents over penetration. Otherwise, if you have targets that are too thin, you may not have enough stopping power for your poundage, and your arrows might zip through it and hitting something you do not intend behind the target. Also, you want a target that is actually big enough so that you do not miss it. If you miss a target or the backstopper, so what could potentially happen? You could hit something you do not intend, and that something could potentially damage your arrows, assuming that thing is not worth more than your arrows. So let's say you damage something that is more expensive than your arrows. Oh no! If that's something that is not worth anything, such as a piece of rock, a piece of granite rock, oh, that would hurt your arrows. So if you have good arrows, you should have good targets, because the good target will really prolong the lifespan of your arrows. And I'm going to show you some proof. So these arrows here, I don't remember when I made them. Probably in either 2017 or 2018. So I actually have 5 in my hand. The other 6 I kept it because I don't usually shoot 12, I shoot 6 usually. So that means since I have 6 in storage, this 5 that I usually shoot, that means I actually lose 1 arrow. I lost 1 arrow, and that 1 arrow is because I Robin Hooded it right after I made the arrow. It was like fresh. After completing them within a week, I Robin Hooded them. So, but beyond that, I have shot them indoors, outdoors, whatever, but of course always with good targets, and therefore you can see that the paint on the shaft eventually got thin and rubbed off, so you can see the black carbon underneath. The paint is kind of like brown, but it exposed the carbon, so you can see that it's definitely a lot of use with these arrows. But you can see that they are still in very good condition. All of them are in very good condition. these arrows are not cheap. Very high quality custom components. This insert, you can't find it elsewhere because we custom designed it. It's very, very, very deep. And then 3K carbon, which we sorted and then we kind of like bin them. So we only took those that spun perfectly straight, and then we spine aligned it. Then we sort them by the spine such that this entire set, the plus minus spine tolerance is 2. Like for example, these are 500 spines, so it goes from like 502 to 500, something like that. So it's very, very tight in tolerance. The weight tolerance is within plus minus of 2 grains. If you look at this part here, everything is made such that it is almost identical. So I spent a lot of time to make these arrows. I would not want to destroy them. So I use very, very good targets to protect my long and large investment into my arrows. Okay, so targets, unfortunately, is often neglected. And why do I say so? Because a lot of people consider target is meant to be destroyed. So why spend on a target? You're gonna destroy anyway, so you're wasting money. And because of that mentality, what happens is it leads to a vicious cycle where you have a lousy target, and that target resulted in a lot of broken arrows. And since you broke a lot of arrows, you are not willing to spend on good quality arrows. And when you are unwilling to spend on good quality arrows, now you break your bow. And eventually, you are no longer willing to spend on good bows. So it is a very bad chain reaction. You do not want that. Spend a good amount on your target, get a good target, and then your arrows will last pretty much forever unless you Robin Hood them. Then you will be willing to spend on good bows. Lastly, for the thumb ring, as written here, you can see, for God's sake, it's only about $50 US for a lifetime. So why did I write this? That's because whenever I have customers who ask me about, like, for example, the Vermeil brass ring, it's only like under $40 and they feel that it's super expensive for them. But I don't think that you should value a thumb ring for its material, because if you look at just the material, yes, of course it is not worth that amount of money, but that's not how I value it. So you see, if you have a good thumb ring, okay, it is comfortable, okay, it's comfortable to use, and that thumb ring is your only connection. It's the single most important connection between you and your bow and your arrows and your entire archery experience. Without a good ring, you have probably a very painful experience because it is uncomfortable, it's biting in your skin. So no matter what bow you have, it could be the best bow that you wanted for years and the best set of arrows you ever had. But if the ring is painful, you will not enjoy it. Or if your ring does not release cleanly, you should badly, again, no matter what bow you have, what arrows you have, it doesn't matter. The single most important connection between you and archery is terrible. So you should be willing to pay a good price for a well-designed ring. Think of it as like a rental. If you have, let's say this is a more expensive ring. Let's say that's $50, right? About $50, maybe even $60. So if you will be using it for a lifetime, let's simplify it, not a lifetime, let's put it 5 years. For $50 divided by 5 years, that's like $10 per year. Is that expensive? If you buy a leather guard, you have to replace that very frequently, and it's gonna cost more than the ring. So don't be skimpy when it comes to thumb ring. Seriously, don't be skimpy. In fact, I'm gonna give you some example, some rings that I personally feel that is very worth to buy. The Vermeil ring. This is the Vermeil Classic model. I started with this, and I think that this is something very easy to use. It's not that expensive. It's under $40, not including shipping. But since, I've owned this for so many years, it's still here. I could probably pass it down to my next generation. So why be skimpy when it comes to rings, right? And then my next ring was the Victory ring, also very good ring. Then I moved on to the Lotus, which doesn't have the guard. I also had this from Mikata thumb rings. Mikata thumb rings from Poland. They made this one for me. This is also a very, very good ring, but unfortunately in my case, this one had a crack, so I didn't want to throw it away, but I couldn't use it anymore. But it's a good ring, and when I bought it from Mikata thumb ring, I never bargained with them. Whatever price they set, I pay for it. I don't bargain with them, because assuming it doesn't break, in my case it cracked because some imbalance in the design. So he wanted to replace this ring for me, but unfortunately the pandemic came, and the shipping was halted worldwide. I couldn't get my replacement. Eventually he just refunded me, even though I really desired that replacement ring that he wanted to give me. So if you want, like this one here is a moose bone ring, very nice craftsmanship. So you can look into his products. He makes good rings. Another one here, the recent ring that I've been promoting, is the hybrid thumb ring that I combined the size of an Ottoman ring, the curvature of the Lotus ring, and then the triangle part here is very similar to the Persian ring from Mikata thumb rings. So I combined that, and I got this design here. Works really great. In fact, I actually offered to pay my friend more than he asked for, and that's because I feel that this ring is really good and it's worth more than what he was trying to charge me for. So I paid him more. I actually offered to pay him more, because think about it, right? If I'm gonna use this for a lifetime, then it is so cheap. It is so cheap. And if this is a great ring, okay, if this is a great ring, it makes my archery experience wonderful.